There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded by people who think they know you, but only recognize who you used to be. It happens in the middle of a conversation when someone laughs an old version of you no longer identify with. It happens at family gatherings when your opinions are brushed off with a familiar phrase. You've always been like this. But deep inside, you're not. Not anymore. You've changed. Maybe quietly. Maybe slowly. But deeply. And yet, the people closest to you don't seem to notice. They still talk to you as if you're frozen in time, like the younger version of yourself who once played a certain role. The one who made everyone laugh. The one who held the family together. The one who always agreed. The one who never said no. That version of you may have been real once, but now it feels like a costume. And the longer you wear it, the more invisible you become. This is the quiet grief of being misunderstood. Not for what you've done, but for who you've become. You've outgrown the role, but they still expect the performance. Families have strong memories. They don't just remember what you did, they assign meaning to it. You're the responsible one. You're the dramatic one. You're the quiet one. You're the one who never causes trouble. These roles are sticky. And even when your internal world shifts, your values, your voice, your boundaries, you may find yourself pulled back into the same old identity like a gravity you can't resist. Not because you want to, but because they expect it. And sometimes it just feels easier to give in, to play the part, to smile politely, to go along with the version of you they understand, even if it feels nothing like the truth. But every time you do this, something in you dims. Not all at once, bit by bit, until one day, you're sitting at the table, surrounded by people who love you, and you feel completely alone. The mask that no longer fits. There was a time when the mask made sense, when playing a role kept the peace, when going along meant belonging. But now it feels different. It feels heavy, false, empty. You nod when you want to speak. You laugh when you want to pause. You agree when your chest is tightening from silence. And no one notices, because the mask is working. They don't see the conflict inside you. They see what they've always seen. Someone familiar, predictable, manageable. But behind your eyes, a part of you is asking, will anyone ever see who I really am now? Do I even remember who that is? Change that happens quietly is easy to miss, but it's real. Sometimes your growth wasn't dramatic. You didn't make big announcements. You didn't demand attention. You simply started questioning things. You read more, reflected more, let go of some old stories, healed some old wounds. And in that process, your essence began to shift. You started speaking less and listening more. Stopped needing to be right. Began choosing peace over performance. Started honoring your limits. Said no without guilt. Stopped apologizing for what you feel. This is real growth. But it doesn't always look impressive on the outside. In fact, to others, it may look like you've changed too much or not enough. But you know the truth. You didn't become someone else. You just stopped pretending. And the hard part is, the people who say they love you don't always know how to love the version of you who doesn't perform anymore. Why being misunderstood hurts so much after 55. When you're younger, being misunderstood feels annoying. When you're older, it feels tragic. Because at this stage of life, time is different. Your tolerance for pretense is lower. Your hunger for authenticity is deeper. And your sense of urgency, to live truthfully, to be seen clearly, to stop hiding, becomes sacred. You're no longer trying to impress anyone. You're trying to feel real. And when the people closest to you still treat you like you're someone you've outgrown, it doesn't just feel frustrating. It feels wounding. Because the space between who you are and how they treat you becomes too wide to ignore. It's not about ego. It's about identity. About dignity. About finally being at a point in life where you know what matters and what doesn't. And yet, still feeling unseen. It's not always malice. Sometimes it's memory. Here's a hard truth. Sometimes your family isn't trying to hurt you. They're just trying to hold on to something familiar. You've changed. They haven't noticed. Not because they don't care, but because they're used to seeing you a certain way. And when someone changes quietly, especially in families, the old version sticks like a photo in an album. Frozen, unchanging, comfortable. But the real you? You're moving, evolving, breathing, and they're still holding the frame. It's painful, but it's not always personal. It's human. You don't have to prove who you've become. The temptation is to convince them, to explain your growth, to give examples, to list your insights, to beg them to understand. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to prove you're becoming. Because your growth is not a debate. It's not a pitch. It's not something to win or defend. It's yours. And sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is to stop performing for people who refuse to update their idea of you. Not out of anger, but out of peace. You're allowed to be misunderstood. You're allowed to let the old version of you die, even if no one holds a funeral for it. You don't need their permission to be free. Here's what matters. You see yourself now. You know what you've lived through. You know what you've let go of. You know what you've reclaimed. And that truth is stronger than any old story they still tell about you. So stop waiting. Stop waiting for them to say, "We see you now. We understand. We're proud." If it comes, receive it. If it doesn't, keep becoming. You didn't do all this inner work to stay trapped in someone else's memory. You did it to be free. Free to speak differently. Free to feel fully. Free to show up without shrinking. Free to love without conditions. Even if they never update their view of you, you don't have to shrink to fit it. And if this message spoke to something inside you, leave a like. Not for the algorithm, but as a quiet signal that you're reclaiming your truth. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to stop being who they remember and start living as who you really are. It's one of the most frustrating parts of inner growth. You've changed, truly changed, but your family still treats you like the same person you were 10, 20, even 30 years ago. They speak to you like you're still fragile, or stubborn, or passive, or loud, or always agreeable. And part of you wants to scream, "I'm not that person anymore." But instead, you smile. You let it pass. You carry the weight of being misunderstood, again. Why does this happen? Why do families, the people closest to us, have the hardest time updating their version of who we are? The answer is painful but simple. People don't relate to who you are, they relate to the last version of you that made them feel safe. People remember the version of you that benefited them. The truth no one likes to say out loud is this: your past self served a function in their life. Maybe you were the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over every conflict. Maybe you were the silent one, who absorbed tension without pushing back. Maybe you were the emotional sponge, always available, always generous, always selfless. And when you start changing, setting boundaries, speaking honestly, saying no, they don't see it as growth. They see it as disruption. You're no longer filling the role that made things easier for them. They don't say it out loud. They may not even realize it. But your change threatens their comfort. And so they try, often unconsciously, to pull you back into the familiar version of you. Not out of hate, out of habit. They've filed you away emotionally. We do this with people all the time, especially in families. We form a version of who someone is based on a few strong moments, years ago, and then we file them away under that label. The dramatic one, the anxious one, the sensitive one, the strong one. And every time we interact with them, we don't engage with the person in front of us. We engage with that mental file. Why? Because it's easier. It requires less presence, less curiosity, less humility. It's efficient, but it's also deeply unfair. Because people grow, people evolve, people become. And when someone changes, they deserve to be re-seen, not reshelved. Families struggle with present moment awareness. Growth requires people to be present, to say, "Who are you now? What has life taught you? What do you believe today?" But family roles are often built on past memories, not present awareness. That's why you can go home for the holidays and suddenly feel 16 again. Your voice shrinks. Your posture changes. You start agreeing with things you no longer believe. You laugh when you feel like crying. Because the family system has its own emotional gravity. And unless you consciously push against it, it pulls you back into the role they're most comfortable with. Even if that role no longer fits, your growth may feel like rejection to them. This is the part that hurts the most. You've done the work. You've reflected. You've healed. You've matured. You've softened and expanded and become more self-aware. But they don't celebrate it. They don't acknowledge it. Sometimes they resist it. Why? Because your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation. It challenges the story they've told themselves about who you are, who they are, and how the family works. And so, instead of honoring your evolution, they dismiss it. You're just being dramatic. You're still the same deep down. We know the real you. Don't try to act different. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to preserve their comfort. But in doing so, they invalidate your truth. Let them be wrong about you. Here's the most liberating truth. You don't have to convince anyone you've changed. You don't need their validation to be real. You don't need their understanding to be whole. You don't need them to see you clearly in order to keep becoming. Yes, it hurts to be misjudged. Yes, it stings when your growth is ignored. But your job is not to shrink yourself into a version they prefer. Your job is to keep showing up as the person you've become, even if they never update their idea of you. Let them be wrong. Let them hold on to the past. Let them file you in the wrong drawer. That's their business. Yours is truth. You are not obligated to reenact the past. Every time you go back into that family space, you'll feel the pull. To perform. To appease. To smile and nod. To revert. But you don't owe anyone that version of yourself anymore. Especially if it costs you your peace. Your clarity. Your growth. You are not required to play the character they wrote for you. Especially now that you've started writing your own story. Let them meet you here in the now. Or let them sit in their memories. You don't live there anymore. Someone needs to hear from you. If this message resonates with you, if you felt the quiet ache of not being seen for who you are now, then you're not alone. And here's something powerful you can do. Backhand index pointing right, leave a comment below. Especially if you're a woman who's gone through this kind of emotional invisibility. Share something that helped you find your way back to yourself. Maybe it was a book, a boundary, a mantra, a silence you finally honored, or a version of yourself you let die, so a more honest one could live. Your story might be exactly what another woman needs to read today. Your voice matters here. Final reflection plus call to action. The past is a strong force, but presence is stronger. Keep choosing your current self over the past one. Keep honoring your own becoming, even if they don't notice. Even if they resist it. Even if they try to pull you back. Because who you are now is worthy of love. Not for who you used to be, but for who you've worked so hard to become. And if this spoke to something inside you, leave a like, not for numbers, but as a quiet sign that you're done performing. This is the work. And you're doing it. Sometimes the pain isn't in what others expect from you. It's in how long you've expected it from yourself. You spent years being the version of you that everyone counted on. The one who stayed silent to keep the peace. The one who held everything together. The one who never complained, never burdened, never failed. You kept the machine running. You were the glue, the protector, the strong one, the reliable one, the one who never changed. But what no one saw, and maybe even you forgot, was the cost of playing that role for so long. And now, after 55, 60, 70, you're feeling it. In your bones. In your energy. In your patience. In your silence. Not because you're weak, but because you've carried too much for too long. And maybe, just maybe, you're finally beginning to realize. You don't want to be that version of you anymore. You can love them and still let go of the role. Here's a truth that's hard to swallow. The people you love the most may have loved you for your role, not your reality. And that doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that your performance became comfortable for them. You never said no. You always showed up. You smiled through the weight. You laughed when you wanted to cry. You said it's fine when it wasn't. And so they began to expect it. They forgot to ask how you were. They forgot that you needed things too. They forgot that under all that strength, there was someone human, soft, tired, real. And for years, you accepted that. Because love made it feel noble. Because responsibility made it feel necessary. But now, you're feeling the weight of it all. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. And you're asking questions you never dared ask before. What if I stop being the one who holds everyone together? What if I say no? What if I let someone else carry the weight for once? And the most terrifying one of all. Who am I if I'm not the person I've always been to them? Your soul is tired of pretending. There's a fatigue that doesn't go away with sleep. A tiredness that isn't about age or effort. It's the exhaustion of living outside your truth for too long. And eventually, your soul starts to protest. Not loudly, but quietly. You feel more withdrawn, less available, less tolerant of the noise, more easily triggered by being overlooked again, more aware of how empty it feels to always show up and still feel unseen. You're not losing your mind. You're losing the version of yourself that was never fully real. And that's not a breakdown. That's a breakthrough. The praise that became a prison. You're so strong. You always know what to do. We couldn't do this without you. You've always been the one who keeps it all together. At first, those words felt good, reassuring, even meaningful. But over time, something shifted. The praise became expectation. The gratitude turned into entitlement. The compliments turned into a quiet pressure. Be this. Always. For everyone. No matter what. And the worst part, you didn't even notice it happening. Because you were too busy being what they needed. You told yourself, I'll rest later. I'll speak up next time. I'll ask for help once they're okay. But later never came. And now, you're standing in the mirror, holding the praise like it's a trophy, but feeling like it's a chain. The hidden grief of outgrowing yourself. There's a grief no one talks about. Not about losing someone else, but about losing a version of yourself that no longer fits, even if it once served you well. The self that held the family together. The self that made everyone feel safe. The self that never asked for much. The self that felt like home for others, but never for you. Letting go of that version feels like betrayal. But it's not. It's a necessary death. So something more authentic can live. And yes, grief will come with it. You may miss the identity. You may miss the familiar rhythms. You may miss how easy it felt to be who everyone wanted you to be. But freedom doesn't come without cost. And your peace is worth more than your predictability. You deserve to be more than what others expect. You've been a role. Now it's time to be a person. A full, living, breathing human being. With complexity, needs, desires, limits, softness, and strength. You've earned it. Not just through your age. Through your becoming. And if they struggle to accept the change, that's okay. You're not here to be who they remember. You're here to be who you are, now. You are not responsible for their comfort with your growth. You are responsible for your alignment with your truth. You don't owe anyone the version of you that made them most comfortable. You owe yourself a life that feels like yours. Reflection and release. Letting go of a role doesn't mean letting go of love. You can still show up, still care, still support. But now you do it from authenticity, not obligation. You do it as you. Not as the version they've memorized. Not as the mask you've outgrown. You stop proving. Stop performing. Stop apologizing for evolving. And in that space, you begin to feel something else rise. Peace. A peace that doesn't come from being everything to everyone, but from finally being whole to yourself. Final message plus call to action. If these words felt like they were describing you, if you've been carrying too much for too long, if you're tired of performing, if you're done being who you used to be, leave a like as a small act of self-respect, as a moment of truth. Subscribe if you're ready to keep walking this path of softening, reclaiming, remembering. You don't need permission to stop playing the old role. This is your moment to choose freedom over familiarity. And that is where your next chapter begins. At some point in your life, you stop asking, when will they finally understand me? And start asking, why do I keep waiting for them to? There's a quiet moment, often after 50, where something inside you shifts. Not all at once, but undeniably. You wake up and realize, you've been living around other people's expectations for so long. You've forgotten how it feels to simply be yourself. Not the version of you they recognize. Not the one they depend on. Not the one they remember from a time you've long outgrown. Just you. And the truth is, that self never left. It was just buried beneath the role, the performance, the survival. This chapter is about uncovering that self again. Not by demanding permission, but by giving yourself something more powerful. Acceptance. You don't need their acknowledgement to be whole. One of the deepest traps of family dynamics is the belief that you must be understood to be validated. You try to explain, to soften your truth, to translate your growth into a language they'll approve of. But they don't always hear you. Not because they're cruel, but because they're still talking to your old self. The version they understand, the one they're attached to. So you shrink. You delay. You perform. And every time you do that, a part of your soul whispers, you're not home yet. Because true belonging doesn't come from being understood by others. It comes from being honest with yourself, even if no one else joins you there. Letting go of the need to be the same. Here's what most families crave: consistency. They want you to stay who you were, to think how you used to think, to play the same emotional role forever. Why? Because it keeps the system running. You were the peacekeeper, the provider, the listener, the one who never challenged, never drifted, never changed. But inside you changed. You've seen too much, grown too far, healed too deeply, and now going back to that old version feels like betrayal. Not to them, to you. The truth? You don't have to stay the same for anyone, not even for the people who love you, especially not for them. Because love, real love, doesn't require stagnation. It welcomes evolution. And if they can't accept your becoming, that's their limitation, not your failure. Choosing peace over performance. You spent decades keeping the peace. You stayed quiet, smiled through tension, softened your voice, swallowed your opinions, played it safe. But here's the secret. Peace without truth is not peace, it's performance. And that performance takes a toll. It wears on your energy. It dims your joy. It feeds quiet resentment. And worst of all, it disconnects you from yourself. You don't need to be loud to be real. You don't need to fight to be honest. But you do need to stop lying. Even in small ways. Even in your tone. Even in your silences. Choosing peace now means choosing to live from the inside out. To make space for who you are, without apology, without disguise. It's a quieter kind of peace. But it's the kind that lasts. You don't owe them the old you. Let this truth sink in. You are not obligated to be the person they feel safest with. You are allowed to change, to grow, to walk away from your old emotional job descriptions. You don't have to be the strong one anymore, or the easy one, or the one who never needs, or the one who holds everything together. That's not love. That's performance. And you've done enough. It's time to come home, to the version of yourself that feels real now. Not the one they remember. The one you are. The one you're still becoming. Let them adjust. Let them struggle. That's their work. Yours is to stop abandoning yourself just to stay familiar. Reclaiming yourself in quiet ways. You don't have to make a scene to reclaim your truth. You don't need a dramatic announcement. You don't need to justify your evolution. You reclaim yourself in quiet ways. Saying no without guilt. Not laughing when something doesn't feel funny. Not joining conversations that drain you. Leaving when you've had enough. Choosing silence over forced participation. Being kind without being small. These are not acts of rebellion. They're acts of return. Every time you choose yourself, gently, consistently, you come back to the center. Not to be seen, but to see yourself clearly again. Letting go of the hope that they'll understand. This is the hardest part. At some point, you must release the hope that your family will get it. That they'll acknowledge your growth. That they'll apologize for the years you felt unseen. That they'll meet you in your new truth. They may not. And if they do, it might take years. Or come in subtle ways. Or never happen at all. But here's what matters more. You understand you. You've walked with your pain. You've earned your insight. You've softened and sharpened at the same time. You are not waiting anymore. You are arriving. With or without witnesses. You are enough, now as you are. Right now in this moment. Without validation. Without applause. Without being fully understood. You are enough. Not because you've healed everything. Not because you've become perfect. But because you are living honestly. That's rare. That's sacred. That's real. Let that be your foundation. The opinions of others can shift. The stories they tell can fade. But your relationship with your truth, that's yours to protect now. And that protection is not selfish. If this message felt like it was written in your language, if it met you in a quiet place where few people ever go, if you saw yourself here, leave a like as a small, quiet affirmation that you're done seeking permission to be yourself. Subscribe if you're ready to keep growing, not louder but truer. Not for others, but for you. And if there's someone else who's quietly outgrowing their old roles, someone who feels misunderstood or unseen, share this with them, not to fix them, but to remind them they're not alone. You never needed their permission to be who you are now. You only needed your own. And now you have it.